Okay, so good evening. We will be continuing on the session this evening, session 5 of our self-transformation course, which is Jnana Yoga, which is part 2 of Buddha Yoga. So last week we had Karma Yoga, which I'll give a little bit of a recap on now. We'll just move it away. Okay. So Karma Yoga is acting in the world, but through self-sacrifice. So we're no longer acting in terms of our own self-will, but listening to something deeper within us and following our conscience to do the will of the divine, if you like. So it's to be total awareness with total attention, to know what we're doing. And even though we may not be entirely sure, as long as we're clear within our conscience, as Krishna said, it's better to follow one's own law of conscience, though imperfectly carried out, than to follow the law of another perfectly carried out. So doing what we feel is right in terms of our conscience, without any self-interest, that is karma yoga, and it's what is called yajna karma, sacrificing oneself. And these relate to the first 4 limbs of Patanjali Yoga Sutras in terms of the yamas, the niyamas, asana, and pranayama. And there's a twofold process in karma yoga and in all spiritual practice, which is practice and dispassion, or vairagya and abhyasa and vairagya. Yes. So at the same time, we're focusing on our spiritual practice, doing some meditation, awareness, whatever it might be, our study, our service, but at the same time being detached to any self-interest that we may have. So there's a positive and negative aspect which are complementary. And as long as we incorporate that within our practice, we're pretty much okay. Okay. I'll leave that for a moment while we let's take a few notes. Yeah, so it's essentially having that awareness about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And remember, a couple of weeks ago, when we talked about the 3 gunas, you can either be sattvic orientated, doing things for the highest in terms of your conscience, or you can be rajasic orientated, doing it for your outcome, or you can be tamasic orientated and not giving a hoot and not even doing anything correctly. That's what we don't want. So you want that awareness. You want that awareness. Okay. So, Jnana Yoga, there's this idea in which Ravi talks about in the Yoga Sutras, which is Rita, which comes from the Rig Veda, which is the whole universe is founded on Rita, or order, and moves in it. So Ravi and Patanjali are making the point that Rita, or order, is the basis of Jnana Yoga, having that insight. There is a degree of awareness which takes us beyond our own personal self, if you like, our own mind, and we get to see what the nature of reality is, which is based in order. So this is contrary to science, which talks about the manifestation being a result of natural evolution, if you like, atoms coming together, etc., as opposed to a consciousness which is directing that manifestation, and that consciousness is order. So Krishna in the 4th chapter encourages Arjuna to take up the sword of sacred knowledge, or yajna, and cleave doubt, that is ignorance, within his heart, and be firm and act and do what he needs to do. So the whole teaching of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is Buddha Yoga. So he's saying, okay, you need to act. This is how you need to act. But you also need to have that insight accompanying how you act. So there's a gradation in how he teaches. He teaches Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and next week will be Dhyana Yoga, or meditation, and then Bhakti Yoga at the end. So all of that combined enables Arjuna or ourselves to act in an integrated way. So it's essentially Rita is a state of consciousness in which we see things the way they are, not the way we wish them to be. So we all have ideas about how things should be, but reality is not always, going to give us what we want. So if we can be detached, which is our sattvic point of view, if we can take that outlook and see clearly and, have a deeper insight, then we can see things as they are and see that order. Because when things are not going our way, we react and want things and want to change things to make things go our way, which is not good. So if we can have clarity of insight, then we can see things as they are. And in John, in the gospel, having a deeper insight is where we are put aside. We no longer have any self-will, as it were. It is the Christ or the one speaking through us, doing the work. I live, yet no longer I, but Christ liveth in me. So it's having that deeper perception. And all yogis and sages, and you read about Maharshi and all the rest of it, they all emphasize that there's something else that's coming through them. It's not them per se. And Ravi said, Jnana is the direct perception of a specific and unique object and its suchness. So it's having that clarity of thought, that perception where we ourselves are out of the way. Yeah, so it's essentially a state of attention and intelligence beyond thought, which is what Krishnamurti talked about a lot in his books, Freedom from the Known, Freedom from Thought. So essentially it's a different state of awareness or insight beyond our normal thinking state. Right, everyone needs some more time for those? Okay. Right, so now this comes under for those who've got the course handouts, this is an extra slide I did in prep this week. So you can take some time to write this down because it comes under number 3 under Jnana Yoga. Because I'm preparing for this, I thought I needed to add this in because Patanjali outlines in Yoga Sutras 1.4, 0.2 to 4.4, he talks about 4 states of Samapati, which is a state of lucidity or luminosity or brightness. So that's a state of clarity and lucidity. And he says that these represent a deeper and deeper degree of clarity of insight and awareness. So there are degrees of insight, and this is what he's trying to get here. So the first one, Savitaka Samapati, is knowledge or jnana based on thought, words, and their meaning. So this is pretty much where we're at on a daily basis with our thinking and our thoughts. A lot of rationality, which comes in helpful because you need a good brain and be able to think. HPB said theosophy is for those who can think and for those who can force themselves to think. It's not for dumb skulls, which is what she called the average member. So this state is about having some knowledge, and it's based on use of the thought of mind. Now, Nivritaka Samapati is knowledge beyond thought, where memory is purified, empty of its subjectivity, and the object alone shines forth. So again, this is having a slightly deeper perception where there's not so much of our subjectivity in the way. I give an example. When I was 22, I might have mentioned it before, I was reading Krishnamurti, I was unemployed, I was flatting, I was 22, and my flatmate was singing in the kitchen. I never used to like his singing, but I thought, okay, just get out of the way and just focus and be attentive. So I did, and her singing was the most beautiful singing I've ever heard. It was like I was not there for a moment. And then the mind kicked in and thought, wow, that was pretty cool. And then it all just disappeared. So that degree of attention, some point, is when you can get rid of the degree of some subjectivity. The next state, Sivachara Samapati, is fusion involving reflection. So there is quite a degree of unity, but there's still some reflection on that unity. There's still some degree of duality, if you like, but it's quite an in-depth reflection. So, for example, I might have had that listening, or you listen to some music or a talk or whatever it might be in nature. There's just that, experience of being at one with your environment. And then finally, Nivachara Samapati, which is beyond reflection. So this is a state of attention and intelligence beyond thought, freed from all discursive activity and images. So this is essentially a state of spiritual lucidity in which the authentic self shines forth without any impressions coming from the outside. So there's no me left, as it were. There's just that full attentive awareness, spiritual lucidity, one with the object. There's no object anymore. So, when you think about, I thought about Ramana Maharshi. He was 16 and he woke up. And he spent a lot of time remaining in silence for many, many years. And of course, you don't know, but this is my own thinking in terms of his silence and what he went through, as a teenager into a young man, into mature manhood. You could suggest or think that he is going through these deeper states of awareness and embedding it into his body and becoming part of him. So eventually when he does start to teach, which we'll get a look at a little bit later, he was embedding that awareness. So he remained silent for many years and wrote notes every now and again. But it's a degree, essentially what Patanjali is saying, there's an increasing freedom from subjectivity. And it is a gradation. And if you think about in the Christian tradition, and there's parallels in the Buddhist and the Hindu tradition, you have the birth, the baptism, transfiguration, the crucifixion, and the ascension. They all represent states of changes in consciousness, deeper and deeper states of consciousness. So just because someone may have an initial awakening, it doesn't mean they're totally fully awake, because there are degrees of awakening. And this is what Patanjali is getting at.
You had water falling on a computer before.
Okay. Now, the yogi sees everything as Brahman. So having a jnanic viewpoint or perception, jnana yoga is we're all one. And there's a great saying from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad: just as the spider web is made of the material that oozes out of the spider, the universe emanates from Brahman and is of the same substance. And since Brahman is everywhere and also can be away from everything, as the spider can move anywhere on the web as well as away from it. So it's kind of paradoxical. It is everything, but it's nothing as well. And, that's just totally beyond thought. I'm not going to say much because nothing much can be said about it. And yet the Upanishads give a great explanation using the spider and the spider web, which is kind of cool. So then Krishna talks about it to Arjuna about what is real knowledge. It's knowing everything in manifestation and outside of manifestation, the field, and as well as the knower of the field. So the field is this body. It's everything that's actually in it. So it's the unmanifest, the elements, the 10 senses, it's the mind, it's buddhi, it's the I maker, the aham kara ego, so the I, the me, which is what HPV talks about as a great heresy. We think we're separate, but at the same time, it does have its relevance because there's involution where we create individuality And then there's evolution where we dissolve it. As Jeffrey Hodson said, a movement from unconscious to conscious perfection. So we are already divine. The problem is we don't know it. So individuality is good. Also, the manifested world contains the 5 objects of the senses. There's desires, pleasure and pain, etc. So this is outlined in chapter 13 of the Gita. So look for you. Yeah, so it's verse 13, chapter 13, verses 5 and 6, for an explanation of all the field of its modifications, the body, etc. So real knowledge is knowing what's in manifestation and what is outside manifestation. Now, Krishna talks a little bit again in terms of action and non-action. And this is what we kind of talked about a little bit about last week as well. That the gunas work among the gunas, the forces of nature. The body does what it does, but we are detached. We're not the body. We're in the world, but not of it, as you like. So having a deeper insight about the body, about the manifested world, one can see that if we can act without selfish intent and motive, which was yajna karma, sacred action, then we are called wise. Krishna would call us a wise sage. And I put this last bit at the bottom, which is not in your notes in bold. When one has abandoned all identification with the fruits of action and is content and not dependent, though engaged in action, in effect does nothing at all. And that's verses 16 to 20 from the Gita. And it's what was kind of said last week with the Chinese expression, sage does nothing, but nothing is left undone. So again, it's paradox. It's like the body is here, it's doing something, but at the same time, we're not doing anything because we're not the body, and yet we are the body. And this is the whole point that Ravi makes throughout all of his 3 commentaries on these 3 texts. There's the interrelationship between spirit and matter, between ourselves, the body, and the self, the one. And that's the balance that we have to achieve, realizing that we need to work in the world because this divine materializes body and it's in us and it's evolving through it. But yet at the same time, it's also outside of the web like the spider. So yeah, if we can have that deeper insight, then whatever we're doing, we're not too stressed out about it. Whatever happens will happen. We do the best we can, but we're not too worried about the fruits. Things will happen as they happen. So long as we're doing what we think is right at any particular moment in terms of our conscience, that's fine. Because remember, we have to essentially engage in yoga, be integrated. If we're integrated, then we can make a sacrifice of self-interest and then do our dharma, which is maintain order in the universe. And that's what we covered in the very first introductory session. Because Arjuna is unintegrated. Humans are prakrita, they're ruled by materiality. We're not integrated, we're basically animals. And our movement is being from unintegrated to being integrated with Sanskrita, well put together. So there's that shift. But to do that, we need to be able to act correctly and therefore make a sacrifice of our own self-interest, and then we can maintain dharma and do what needs to be done according to the one, which is coming through us here. So then Ravi says no serious teaching can take place except in a state of love. So, there's the saying, no cross, no crown. If you bow your head, you've got to bow your head to receive your crown, as it were, in Christian tradition. So a real jnani is someone who's opened their heart and has submitted their own self-will because we can't really have any deeper insight and go beyond ourself, which is our thoughts and all the rest of it, if we're not willing to have some humility, as it were, if you like, to bow our head. And there's comments there in terms of John. Whoever keeps my commandments that he has from me is the man who loves me. The man who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I shall love him and reveal myself to him. So all these yogis saying, and in Krishna in the Gita, it's about self-inquiry and sacred knowledge, and that happens in a more sacred space or sacred state. Remember earlier on, a couple of weeks ago, for those who've been here right from the whole get-go, Samaritan woman coming to see Jesus in the gospel, and he has an exchange with her, and the disciples are away, and they come back and see this exchange, the sacred exchange, because she's a seeker, and he can see that she's right for some of his teaching. The disciples just stay away at a distance. They don't interrupt that sacred exchange. And Krishna says in chapter 4, verse 32 to 33, I haven't got it, so I'll quote it to you. All yajna is born of action, and the greatest yajna is that of direct sacred knowledge, jnana. For it is in sacred knowledge that all actions, without exception, culminate. So that's chapter 4, verse 32, 33. So yeah. Yeah, so there's that emphasis on real insight can only take place when there's love, when we are out of the way. Okay, so this idea of renunciation, in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is asking Krishna about renunciation, because there's a contradiction for Arjuna. He's saying, how can I act skillfully but remain in a state of actionlessness? Because it requires the abandonment of all activity or renunciation. So it's a state of mind, if you like, state of being. We act, but we're not doing anything ourselves. It's the one working through us when we have that deeper insight. So this quote here from the Bhagavad Gita essentially says, having mentally renounced all actions out of self-interest, we still have to act, but it's not out of self-interest. The embodied one sits happily as the master of the nine-gated city. And the nine-gated city is all of the organs of the five senses and the reproduction and excretion organs. So it's all those components of the body that are under our total control, and therefore we can do what needs to be done at any one particular time. But ultimately, Ravi says real renunciation is freedom from samkalpa or self-will. So, whatever we're doing on our daily basis, it can be anything, it still can be self-motivated. So again, it's the question, having awareness and attention, whatever we're doing on a daily basis, are we renouncing our own self-will, as it were? And Cyril Scott in the Initiate series, and the first book, The Initiate, Some Impressions of a Great Soul, he basically says, true renunciation is painless. So if you really have a deep insight, there's no struggle, there's clarity. You break your leg, you don't have a committee meeting to figure out what to do, you're straight off to hospital and that's it, you know what you have to do. I remember once when I was 22, I was flatting, had a couple of beers one night, no problem. And then I went to meditate the next morning and my head nearly exploded. It was like, whoa. And I just realized there that meditation and alcohol are not conducive. That was it, gone. I never had to worry about it again. So there's that clarity of insight, right? So in that sense, the renunciation was not at all painless. It was just insight That's it, gone, no problem. So, yeah. Now, in relation to, I'm just, because we've been comparing yoga, the limbs of yoga and Patanjali. So for this Jnana yoga session, I'm equating it with pratyahara, which is an inward turning through all the senses and going within. So again, it's no longer having that outward focus, but having an internal focus and going within. So from that, there's mastery of the senses, etc. So it's just a reversal, if you like, of you know, outward turning and whatever the mind is being interested in. HPV talks about, the mind being a perfect instrument, which is what Patanjali talks about as well. So it's that inward focus. So I'm just saying, as a parallel to Jnana yoga, if you want to think about pratyahara in that way, you can. In Patanjali's system. So ultimately, if we can have a deeper insight and be still to some degree, that's all we need to do. And clarity will come and we'll know what to do, and when and why and how. So the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. And as Ravi says, everything comes to those who do not crave for anything, which is paradoxical, but paradox is one of the laws of spirituality. Now, I quoted a bit there from HPB, because she wrote in The Voice of the Silence, which is dedicated to the few mystics in the Theosophical Society. That's her introduction to it. She talks about essentially the great bird, and it means essentially the swan or goose, the mystical bird in occultism, analogous to the Rosicrucian pelican and in the Zohar, and it basically is descending. The one is descending into manifestation, into the universe. So she calls the sacred bird out of space and time. So she's essentially saying, let us be sitting in the one with full awareness and having that deeper insight, which is what Jnana yoga gives us, and let the Lord work through us without any personal input. Now, there's a great theosophical classic, Light on the Path, and in the back on little essay on karma, talks about living in the eternal. So it says, learn now that there is no cure for desire, no cure for the love of reward, no cure for the misery of longing, save in the fixing of the sight and hearing upon that which is invisible and soundless. Begin even now to practice it, and so 1,000 serpents will be kept from your path. Live in the eternal. So it's just being still whenever we can, having that quiet time, and letting that direct us as much as we possibly can in our daily life. So, the theosophical kind of worldview, if you like, service, study, and meditation. So you get out in the world, have some study and have some reflection, and it all complements each other. So as you go on, there is that whatever you get in your meditation, your study, is embodied in your daily life and what you're doing. So it all corresponds. So yeah, that's essentially what I've got for Jnana Yoga, although I have got something a little bit extra, which we'll have a look at from Ramana Maharshi. Okay, so that was questions. So what I'll do now is, and this is another approach from Ramana Maharshi in terms of having some jnanic yogic insight, right? Because this is his approach. We'll have a look at it, and then we'll have a bit of a chat. So he was talking about individuality. Individuality is ultimately an illusion, but it has its place. So obviously he's a great yogi and has that deeper insight. And what's right for him at the top of the mountain is not necessarily right for those of us who are lower down the mountain. But at the same time, it has its relevance in what he's saying. So he's offering again, when we talked about practice and dispassion, abhyasa and vairagya, Maharshi's taking a similar approach, which we'll look at as well, to help us have a deeper insight into the one, which is Jnana Yoga. So he starts with a projector analogy, the I, the me. Then he has the self, which is the screen of consciousness. So we have the movie projector, the screen, and then we have the movie. We have the characters, okay? So these are all the characters. There's that rebel, that young fellow, 20, 30 years ago, that's yours truly. That's that curly hair that's... June is the sage. And then we've got the heroines and the heroes. So, you know, we're all, the characters, we're all in the movie, we're all playing our parts, right? So these are the analogies which Maharshi is using, which I think is great. So let's have a look at what he says, which is quite fascinating. I'll move this right out of the way so you can see it. So I'll just read it out. In just the same way we project a dream world at night, the world we see in front of us is merely a projection of the one who sees it, the me, the I. Projection manifests on the screen of consciousness, where we take it to be real and imagine that we too are in this world experiencing its dramas. We are unable to recognize that we are the screen on which the action unfolds and falsely believe that we are one of the characters. The source of the projection is the I and identifies with the body, and then creates a false dream world to play and suffer in. So this is what he says we should do. Inquiry into the nature and origin of this I stops the projection and establishes one in a state where one knows oneself to be the indivisible consciousness in which all creation appears and disappears. This is liberation. So he talks about self-inquiry, which is questioning the origin of the I, and which is your abhyasa, your practice. And then he also talks about self-surrender, or dispassion, or vairagya. So both of those, again, are required. So, you know, we're all identifying in these roles and the movie, but really the screen of consciousness, the screen is where it's at. So, yeah. So, obviously, Ramana Maharshi is pretty woken up and, you know, he's a great jnana yogi. So he sat silently for many years, not saying a word, and was just transmitting through osmosis his awareness. And those who got it, and those who didn't. Hence, a few more words were required. So essentially, the core of his teaching was self-inquiry, ask who it is this I is projecting. Don't get concerned with what the movie is, whether you're upset, annoyed, or happy or joyful. Just ask, who is it? And then surrender one's self-interest at the same time. So, yeah, I like that analogy. So I think it was relevant. I've had it here for a little while. I've been wondering how I would use it. So yeah. So now we'll have some questions in chat. I'll stop sharing screen. Okay. Yeah. Alrighty, team. So that's what I formally have to present on Jnana Yoga. Any comments, thoughts, and questions? Brett.
Oh, yeah, I was in the these discussions that in that last couple we define what I have to follow.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I've got to define for myself saying that the 95% of the masses and the other 5%, which I kind of want to identify with, maybe the difference is that the 95% have lots of things, but are bored and listless, and whereas the Theosophist can present very little and have more than enough to deal with.
Yeah, so 95% of people are bored and listless, whereas the Theosophists have maybe not so much concern about worldly stuff, but still have a lot to deal with, right? I mean, we've got to look at ourselves and wake up. I mean, here, there are no saviors, okay? Blavatsky made that quite clear. You have to do the work yourself, but we're all students supporting each other, inquiring together, which is great. Make a little community to do that. But no one's going to, no one's going to do it for you. So, yes, in one sense, if the 5% of us are sitting here, we've got plenty to do, as opposed to getting out in the world and doing lots what you can do in the world. So yeah. I mean, because ultimately, how can we create the nucleus of a new society based on unity if we don't have that experience ourselves? I mean, Maharishi was asked, someone said, oh, how can I help the others? How am I going to help these people? And he said, well, there are no others. So he just shot down that whole question straight away. So Jnana Yoga is about having that direct perception and lucidity of oneness. I mean, that's what it's all about. So yeah. And this is a balance, like you're out in the world, going to work. I mean, and Maharishi himself said, he said, and essentially don't run off into the Himalayas and become a monk. He said, you can actually live in the world and be in the world and do your spiritual practice. He said, you can self-inquire and self-surrender while you're doing your daily job. Now, daily work. And Ravi Ravindra said, prior to the Buddha, all the sages in India were all householders, So we're in the world, and it's a better test. If you can do it here, you can do it anywhere, right? So it's great to be out in the world and have this opportunity to wake up to some degree. And everything provides us an opportunity. And as we said, with the gunas, it's great. It's like, I've been here, 34 years? I'm starting to, maybe I might learn something, I don't know, as it were, but it's like, I start to see how, how you can engage, how you watch yourself, how you watch others operate in terms of the three gunas, or, it's quite fascinating. Once you get the framework under your belt, as it were, you can start to see how things operate in yourself and in others and learn from it. I mean, the Buddha said, right, if you want to untie a knot, all you need to know is how the knot was tied. That's it. Which is self-knowledge, self-awareness, know thyself, having a deep perception. And when that perception is there, everything else is sweet. So when we actually understand how we trip ourselves up on a daily basis, how our ego gets in the way, the me, the projection, as Maharishi called it, the projector, then we're all sweet. Because we understand the knot, and therefore the knot is untied. Okay.
How do we
Okay, so Sophie's question is around the reoccurring thoughts that she said. How do you know to untie the knot? How do you know yourself? So one practice is essentially you can have at the end of the day, have a diary, make a few notes, that kind of thing. I do that myself. Have some quiet thinking time. Go away, sit quietly, make some notes. Think about what you're doing in your daily life. Obviously, having your understanding of the spiritual framework, of the theosophical framework, your spiritual teachings from any tradition, what we're covering in the course, for example. Understanding, because you need a good understanding of the spiritual life and what it entails and what the practice entails. And then you can start to think, okay, with your self-awareness, you might do a bit of time for meditation, do some reading, got to do your study, all of that. So it's a kind of integrated approach. And as you do that, and as the years roll on, you start to see things, you start to see stuff. But in terms of, if you really want to focus on direct thought control, just observe and then come back to a silent state, if you like, a state of awareness. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, he wrote I Am That, a great book. He says, don't struggle with your thoughts. Just watch them like you watch the street traffic and come back to I am and be still. So in one sense, it's like we are watching how the body works. Well, we talked about the three gunas and all of that. Okay, fine, but that's not me. I'm something else. So
do you get better at that?
yeah, practice makes perfect. Yeah.
Then I'll take a step back and be like, well, it's not me. But then when I get back into them, I'm like,
yeah, practice. So it's going to take a lifetime, right? I mean, I get stressed out every now and again. I think, why am I doing that, you conehead? I mean, it's just nuts. So it's always like, it's like there's a book called By Concentration by Ernest Wood, An Approach to Meditation. And he talks about the mind like a dog. Come, bring it back. It runs off, bring it back. Sit back, being still in the center with the self, the one. Yes. Yes, exactly. We want to get carried away. And that is the practice. Can we come back and be still? Have some quiet time. Even if if I've got some energy, I'll do some meditation. But if I had a full day at office and I'm flat out, and, I'll just sit quietly in the evening or in the morning, whatever. Listen to I listen to some stuff with Ramana Maharshi talking in the evening. Anything like that to bring you back to being the center, the self, the one. I am. And that's the key. So sure, the body needs to do what it needs to do. You need to study and plan all the rest of it. Fine. But bring the awareness back to something else, something that's here and is always here. I mean, the very fact that human beings can observe their thoughts means we're not these thoughts, because thought cannot observe itself. It's something else. So don't identify. This is the whole point. Maharshi is saying, don't identify with our thoughts, feelings, emotions. So then what are we? Something else will bubble up, because if we're already divine, we don't have to try and attain our divinity. We already are divine. So let's remove the modifications of thought, which is what yoga is in terms of Patanjali. Everything that bubbles up and annoys us and all the rest of it, the body doing what it does, people, holding on to our suffering. I know what that's like. Just, okay, fine. That's not me. I am the one, the self, that Brahman, whatever you want to imagine the divine to be. So it's always just bringing energy back to that quiet space throughout the day, whatever you're doing. So yeah, and it takes time and energy. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. I mean, this is what Krishna says, I think it's the second chapter, where in the Gita, Arjuna says the mind is very, very difficult to curb, but it can be curbed, right? And it's just practice, because we've had incarnations and incarnations of individuality focusing on the me, the I am it. But now we're reversing that process. And this is what the Gospel of John talks about in terms of, it's called repentance, but metanoia, complete radical reorientation, 180 degrees. We're reversing essentially everything that we've done for lives upon lives of individuality. We're going in a new direction. And it's going to take time to turn the ship around. But don't beat yourself up. I've done that over many years. Not good. So that's the practice, really. And nothing is ever lost. Whatever we do in this life, we start where we left off. And you think about it logically. Today we woke up pretty much the same we were yesterday, bar earthquakes and everything happening in the night, right? Logically, when we die, we will start where we left off in this incarnation. Same logic. The only difference is how it happens. Nature holds this body together overnight for us, and we wake up pretty much the same. Life upon life upon life is the same logic, the same laws of nature holding this body together, holding our thoughts, emotions, our spiritual insights together. So whatever we do, nothing is ever lost, and that's the great thing, because then evolution goes forward and never goes backwards. You may not do, if you don't do too much, you may not go far, but if you focus, there's a lot of karmic results, because all energies are working in the same way. Emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, we're all focused on the self-transformation, if you like, trying to wake up, find out who we really are. All of that energy combined has humongous results. And the key thing is, we may not see it physically at this physical level, but inwardly things are really, really cooking along. That's what the masters say, right? So it's like, wow. So just have a bit of faith, trust yourself, and let things unfold. Awesome.
I think it's just like you go to the gym and get fit, your recovery is quicker. It's the same way with the mind. The more you practice, you become aware quicker that it has wandered. That's the only sign you're getting forward. It's not that the mind will not wander.
Okay.
It's how quickly you become aware it's gone.
Yeah. Oh.
It's not necessarily something you're immediately aware of either. Sometimes I'll have a meditation, have a solution, and then realize that over the day I've managed to concentrate my way through a deep passage of the book. What have you, it doesn't necessarily, you don't necessarily make a connection until afterwards, and you realize, oh, I'm actually way better at this.
Also, when you don't have a good meditation, there's no such thing.
Yes.
You can't have a blissful meditation each time. In fact, because you're meditating and stilling the mind, the stuff underneath starts arising, and that's a good sign. Most people think, oh, I'm feeling depressed after this, I didn't have a good meditation, but that's actually a good one. So yeah, my mother, I suggested her to do yoga nidra recently, and she just did it 2 days. The second day she said, oh, I just got tight, the muscles got tight instead of relaxing. I said, that's not what it is. It's your muscles are already tight. You just became aware of it because you're trying to relax it. The muscles are not used to relaxing. It's the same way with the mind. It's not used to focusing. So because you start focusing, everything else becomes quiet, and all the mud under the surface of the clear water starts arising. And then you see your real self of the other side. So be happy if you see any negative stuff, because it was there all the time. Now you can do something about it. Because now you know it's there.
Okay.
Life is easier now, isn't it?
Great.
I was just going to look what Sushma said about going to the gym. That's how I actually view the mind as just another muscle. You've got to work it.
Yes, you have to practice.
Yeah, Brett says your mind's another muscle and you've got to work it. But remember, yeah, so I mean, it's a tool, you need it, but it's not us. So when we need to put it aside and be still and just chill out, like, yeah, it's great. Like I see such, it's like what is it called? The lazy general. One of my colleagues at work talked about different types of generals. The lazy general. It's not doing much, but things are going on up here or within. So, when we need to be still, we can be still. When we need to do some stuff, we're doing stuff. But at the same time, we're not doing anything because it's not us doing anything. It's the body. The gunas working among the gunas. So,
Simon, so the argument you've given is that if one's bedeviled by thoughts, seeking their origin and finding out why you're having that stream of thoughts isn't going to really be as productive as merely observing those thoughts.
Well, if you can find out where it's arising, then you have control over it. It's, first step is to observe that they are happening. And then you try to find the source of it. And then when you find the source, then you know what to do, isn't it?
That would complement what Buddha said about untying a knot.
Yeah. Yes. How did it get tied up?
So first they have to be aware the original knot.
Well, that's the whole point. A lot of us are not even aware we're in jail. But here we're coming to the prison and the wardens are saying, hey, we're in jail, let's try and get out, you know. We're all the prisoners trying to get out of our minds and all the rest of it, you know. This is what I talked about the other day with the Matrix and the Truman Show, and what Mahashi's analogy with the projector and the screen and the characters, you know. All the world's a stage and we just merely play. Same analogy, right? Shakespeare. So all of the sages, if they really know their stuff, are saying the same thing, and they all say it, they give the same message but in different ways. And the Mahatmas themselves have said their experience of reality, they all compare notes based on their experiences, and they all agree that this is the nature of reality at their level, in the same way that scientists replicate their findings and agree that their findings are correct at their level. So the same process occurs, and all the sages are saying the same thing. And then you know you're on the right track, because if you have a similar kind of insights, you go, yeah, this seems to align with what everyone else has said, who really know their stuff. There's no delusion, you know.
But if the thoughts are right, then you'll know they're on being on the right track.
Well, yeah.
Part of it, but you just have to feel that is right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what, you know.
It's into your mind.
Yeah, whatever's right for you is good. You know, follow your own conscience, which is the divine, the one is in us, following it, you know. I mean, we're not here by chance. No way. We're all here for a purpose. We're just, you know, no one is here by a flick of the wrist, you know. It's like there's some purpose for here. You're here because you want to be here. Something has drawn you here, and we're here. So it's fascinating.
Something here you're going to learn.
Well, yeah, wake up.
As long as you are attached to something here and you're fascinated with in this world, you're going to be gone. Yeah, even a flower. If you want to see beauty, you want to see this, that, and you're attached to things or any small thing in the world, you're going to be born again.
I want to be born again.
Yes, you'll be, don't worry.
Yeah.
I also have to acknowledge the void when there is nothing going on. And you know, coming from the punk movement, you know, one of them said hilariously that, you know, remember to do nothing when there's nothing to do.
Yeah, one of the punk scenes from Brett when he said, remember do nothing when there's nothing to do. So
You don't know what to do.
we don't know what to do. So yeah, absolutely. And doing nothing is doing something. You cannot do nothing, right? Even doing nothing is something. And that's knowing when to act, knowing what to do, when to do it. And that's the whole essence of Jnana Yoga. I'll just have a look at some comments on the chat. I'll turn that around. Oh, okay, Gloria, thank you, Simon. Welcome back, Sushma. Lovely seeing your pilgrimage, very inspiring. Yes, so she is back. Thank you. Valentina, thank you very much. Esther, great. Very clear, that's good, because, you know, I'm trying to put together, well, not me, see, it's not me doing anything, it's the one. I don't exist. Putting together 3 texts, you know, it's kind of, and picking out what to put together and relate it all. It's quite intense, but that's the whole point. The body will need to do what it needs to do. You think about it, you reread, you prepare, all the rest of it, and then you just let it flow. I mean, I'm really enjoying this, doing this stuff. It's fantastic.
I think it's important because, you know, there's this psychologist who wrote this book on flow. How do you know you're not the person doing it? It's because when you're in a state of flow, you have a connection to something higher. He wrote a book on psychology, but I think that's what you could try and realize.
You hear that, everyone? So she's talking about flow.
There's a book called The Flow.
Oh, yeah.
There's some really complicated name for me to pronounce.
Actually,
I think something like
yeah.
something.
Okay.
But he's very famous and he's written this book on the flow. I've always wondered, you know, when you say, oh, I'm not the one doing it, it can be irresponsible or it could be being in the flow.
Ravi in the Yoga Sutras talked about a Canadian pianist who knew Glenn Gould, who was renowned for his interpretation of Bach, who was asked to play on one occasion, and he played very exceptionally. And they asked him how he did it, and he said, "I did not play; the piano played itself." But to get to that stage, you've got to do a lot of prep. It's like Ravi said, insight favors the prepared. Now, if this body hadn't done all this prep, then nothing would have come out. It would have been coherent, and the comments on the chat would not be what they are. So yeah, it's fantastic. Right. Anyone online want to say something?
Yes, Simon. Thank you, Simon. Great session, great clarity. And also lovely when you turn the screen round and we can feel like we're there with the other people in the hall. It was very interactive tonight. And yes, thank you to everybody.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Just to let you all know, today is Krishna's birthday. I think that's very special that we are studying Bhagavad Gita on the day of Krishna's birthday. Today is the day of Krishna's birth. He was born sometime at midnight early this morning. It's 5,251st birthday.
Wow.
We talk about the Kali Yuga.
And it's really special for me because I've just been to the places that are significant for him, Mathura and Vrindavan. So yeah, it's been really nice. And I was too tired to do anything, but I did some fasting. And to be listening to the Bhagavad Gita, that's icing on the cake. Thank you, Simon. And to all of you for being here on his birthday.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. I mean, the society, you know, the masters had to convince their bosses that humanity was ready for an organization like this. Thank God they got the green light, because they had to make a case, because the Mahachoyan, the big cheeses said, "No, we can't have this yet." But they made a case, because where would we be if this place wasn't here? That's what I wonder, you know. So we have a lot to be thankful for. So yeah, it's great to be together, and yeah, lovely to see everyone online and in the lodge. Fantastic. All right, now I'm going to I'll stop the recording. So closing this session 5 of Jnana Yoga.